Hi everyone, it's KJ here, and we got a new set of Samsung phones just released. And you know I like taking a deeper look and comparing their camera systems. Right now I'm going to be comparing the camera systems of the Zflip and the Samsung Galaxy Note 10. On paper they have the same megapixel count for their main cameras, but as we've seen in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean the same quality pictures. In fact, every time I compared the smartphone cameras, even when they were released just months apart, the image quality seemed to take a step back because of better image processing techniques. In this video, I'll be comparing the two phones side by side, and we'll be looking at images shot both inside and outside in different lighting conditions, and even look at the 4K video quality and night mode capabilities of both phones. I updated both phones to their most recent updates, and both phones were set to automatic. Let's get right into it. Quickly comparing the camera systems on paper, we can see that the Note 10 has a triple camera setup with its 12 megapixel dual aperture main camera, 12 megapixel 2x telephoto camera, and 16 megapixel ultra wide camera. It even has a time of flight 3D depth sensor. The Zflip also has a 12 megapixel main camera, but its aperture is fixed. Its ultra wide camera is actually just 12 megapixels, which is 4 less than the Note 10. Both phones can shoot 4K at up to 60 frames per second, and their selfie cameras can shoot 4K and have 10 megapixels. But note that the Note selfie camera has a slightly wider aperture. Okay, now that the specs are out of the way, know that I'm going to look at images shot in various lighting conditions. I'm going to start at images shot in great lighting, and then we'll let the lighting get progressively worse. Then we'll also look at the 4K video quality of both phones. Okay, so I'm seeing all these images for the first time, and right off the bat I can notice a couple things. First, the blues in the skies and the greens in the grass seem to be more pronounced on the Zflip. The Note 10 did tend to suffer with washing out colors a little too much, so maybe this is what Samsung is going for with the Zflip's camera. Let's look at more pictures to see if this is the case. This next image shows how great the Note 10's camera still is. Both images came out pretty identical in this case, except for the differences in color temperature between the two photos. If we zoom into both photos, we can see that the level of detail is excellent on both. The Zflip just happens to take the cooler toned images in this case. In this next image, we can see a bit more clearly the fact that the Zflip seems to produce the cooler toned images. For images like this in great lighting, the level of detail is going to be great on both phones, but the color processing that you prefer will probably mean you lean to one side over the other. Let me know what you prefer in the comments. So this next image, again, is excellent on both phones. I'll have to say personally I'm starting to like the saturation level of the Zflip more than on the Note 10, but on the other hand, I am liking the color temperature of the Note 10's images more than the Zflip's. If we zoom into the trash cans, we can see that both phones also pick up a tremendous amount of detail. Here's an image shot on the side of a highway as the sun was beginning to set. Again, I really like the saturation level of the Zflip. The colors just pop a nice amount. If we zoom into the car, we can see that the Zflip actually seems to be able to shoot this specific image faster than the Note 10. We can see this from the fact that the car is less blurred in the Zflip's image. Okay, now looking at the live focus images shot on both phones, I can now see a clear difference. Samsung phones, in general, have never done as good of a job with portrait-style pictures because they tend to really smear out any details and do a terrible job with colors, which you can see on the Note 10's image. However, the Zflip is producing an image that is very iPhone-like. Both did fairly okay with edges, but because of overall detail, I think the Zflip just knocks the Note 10 out of the park on this one. I can see that the Note 10 did a bit of a better job with detecting edges around my hair, but overall the Zflip just has to take it in this case. It is just able to preserve so much more of the colors on both my skin and shirt, while also maintaining more details. Looking at the selfie images of both phones, there seems to be much less differences than with the rear live focus pictures of both phones. Here, I'll say that the Note 10's slightly larger aperture does seem to be picking up slightly more detail on my face than the Zflip is. Both phones also have live focus capabilities with their front cameras that do a pretty decent job overall. Before I get into more challenging lighting scenarios, I wanted to take a look at the 4K video quality of both phones, and I'm genuinely curious about how the two phones compare. Okay, looking at this footage for the first time, both phones take incredibly high quality video. I do notice that the Note 10 seems to have the wider angled video. This may be because Samsung has amped up their image stabilization a bit more, which usually sacrifices how much of the image is captured. The ultra-wide cameras of both phones are also very high quality and continue that gimbal-like image stability that's honestly just really impressive to me. Only the Note 10 has a telephoto camera though, so the Note 10 has that added bit of versatility if you're trying to shoot video of something further away. Either way, I really don't see other significant differences between the two phones' video, they're just quality.
Now I'm testing the front two cameras of both phones. They're both set to 4K at 30 frames per second right now. And I just want to see how the image stabilization compares on both phones. I'm also curious how the color reproduction is on both phones and how my voice is picked up by the microphone. Let me know which front-facing video camera you like better in the comments, and tell me if there's any sort of difference that you notice. Right now I can already see that the Zflip does seem a little bit wider, but I'll have to look at this later.
In terms of the front 4K video qualities of both phones, the Note 10 has a sharper image, hands down. Details and colors on my face are simply preserved better, and overall the video is just a bit more crisp than the video shot on the Zflip. Needless to say, the Zflip does produce some quality front-facing video though, and if I were just looking at the video from it, I would say that it's still impressive for a selfie camera. The audio quality, however, is better on the Zflip in my opinion. The Note 10 seems to have this intense noise reduction algorithm, which ultimately just makes my voice sound tinny. However, the Zflip lays off a bit and allows my voice to sound a little more natural. Both phones did a decent job with the live focus video. I still don't know if it looks good enough for me to ever use it for a video versus just a standard selfie video, but it's cool to see that both phones are able to process the blurring effects in real time. You should know that all the images you just saw were taken outside with great lighting conditions, so I'm going to focus the rest of the video on images that are a little more realistic to what you're going to be shooting on a day-to-day basis, and to see how both phones compare when lightings aren't as ideal. This first type of scenario is usually pretty tough for phone cameras because of the various direct and indirect light sources in an otherwise dim environment. I would say that both phones did a great job in this case. I'd say that the Zflip produces the slightly more exposed image, which did seem to overexpose the highlights a bit. Again, there's slight differences in the color reproduction of both phones, but in general, both are very high quality images. Here we have direct sunlight, which I've seen has overpowered an image in the past. However, both phones do an excellent job of exposing the sun and the foreground here. I think the Zflip has been doing a decent job with adding a bit of an extra color punch without pushing images to the point of oversaturation. This next image has a lot going on, and again, both phones do an excellent job. Other than the differences in color temperature and contrast, there doesn't seem to be any significant differences between the qualities of these two photos. They're both just good. If we zoom in closer to the weights, we can see that differences in contrast I was talking about. Differences in texture are just a little more pronounced on the Zflip, as opposed to those on the Note 10. This next image was taken at noon when it was really bright outside, and both phones did a great job given the conditions. I'd say that the Note 10 actually seemed to do the better job in this instance. The blues are a little more pronounced and everything is just more properly exposed with the Note 10's image. This next photo was taken while on the move and at the same exact time on both phones. And again, I'd say that I actually prefer the Note 10's image here. For some reason, the image on the Zflip just looks more washed out in comparison. Keep in mind that a lot of these differences I'm pointing out are just because I'm looking at the two images side by side. All these pictures would all be classified as excellent smartphone pictures. Starting with the Pixel phones a couple years ago, a lot of phone manufacturers have been making an emphasis to focus on their night mode capabilities of their phones. And Samsung was no different this year. With the Zflip and the Note 10, they included night mode capabilities that have actually been really impressive, so let's see how they compare. Okay, so right off the bat, I can see that the Note 10 just produces the better image here. The details just look more washed out on the Zflip, and I think I know why. The Note 10 has a dual aperture, so it switches to its f1.5 mode when it gets this dark. This allows more light to be taken into the sensor, and ultimately helps the software just refine the image. The Zflip solely relies on software, and when looking at the images side by side, it shows. This next image tells a similar story. I want to be clear when saying that it is really dark outside at this point, so it's impressive that these phones are picking up this much detail to begin with. It's just when looking at the images side by side, we can see how the two phones directly compare to each other. I will add that I do like the colors in the Zflip's image better here, but the whole image just looks a bit more washed out. This next image of two black cars will help you show that the Note 10 is just bringing in more light. The Zflip is noticeably overcompensating for the lack of light on its end, which is making the black of the cars look more gray. The blacks are noticeably deeper in the Note 10's image. For completeness sake, here's one last night mode picture. This is probably the most similar night mode shots between the two phones. Both did great given the scenario, and I actually have no complaints with either phone in this case. Okay, that camera comparison was a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. Usually it's a guarantee that the phones would produce better images if it's a newer phone, but Samsung obviously had to make some hardware compromises here to make their phone foldable. So the differences were less predictable. So this video was a cool breakdown between the software and hardware capabilities of each phone. While the Zflip probably processes images and videos better, the Note 10 has that dual aperture that can physically help pictures look more ideal. Also, the added versatility of the telephoto lens just means that the Note 10 is the more versatile camera system. However, there are some images by the Zflip that I just thought did the flat out better job, like the live focus pictures we looked at. Samsung seemed to finally figure out how to properly process those types of images, and I'm excited to take a look at the S20 and S20 Ultra when I get my hands on those. Let me know in the comments what you thought of each phone's camera system, and actually just tell me which one was your favorite. As for this video, that's all I had to talk about today, so as always, make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter to stay up to date with what I'm doing. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and have the notification bell clicked to stay up to date on my latest videos. And if you use the promo code SECRET30, you'll be able to get 30% off my sweaters. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.